This meeting is being recorded.
Hello.
Hello, Stephane. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for carving out some time out of what I undoubtedly is a busy schedule.
That's okay. Absolutely fine.
Well, and you know what? And I've got to say something when I was looking at your history, because looking at your background, pharmaceutical, all of those things, and evolving into procurement,
hmm
it's like it does it. There is a straight line. I just don't know what that straight line is, but it's interesting how it evolved to that. But you've got to have that kind of background for what you do, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. So actually, I've worked for I'm scientist by education. Went to the University of Pharmacy in France, and then I've worked in clinical management for 5 years as a study manager of global international studies. And then actually I was hired by Sanofi to develop sourcing slash procurement for clinical services, and they were interested in having someone coming from the business to develop the sourcing activity. And I was trained to sourcing, from very tactical thing up to the most strategic overview of category management and so on. But they decided to get someone coming from the business. So that's how I had this path between clinical management and sourcing.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been in high tech for 40 years and almost as long as in procurement. And most people who started with procurement or in the early days actually came from somewhere else and not actually. Now, of course, it's all changing. But I'm interested in this. Maybe let me give you a little bit of an idea for Focal Point. What I'm doing is I'm an analyst, independent. And one of the things that I try to do is provide insights that aren't the usual case studies or the raw or anything like that, but get to the real meat and potatoes of not confidential information on your part, but I want to look at how did you come across finding Focal Point? What was it like really dealing with them? The implementation, what were some of the challenges? And by the way, every implementation has a challenge. It's not new. I've been involved with some, but you're going to get some of those things. But I'm really trying to get a real gauge for what it is, because you're a huge organization. You're large. You obviously have ERP platforms and other technologies. So maybe start off with that. How did you discover Focal Point?
Good point. So actually, I think it was an email that I had received something like 5 years ago, so 4 years ago, about from Focal Point, saying this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. I think they had sent this randomly to a lot of people in the sourcing slash procurement area and so on. And I found it interesting, was not ready necessarily to dig into this. I was just new to my position. I just joined Otsuka, and I say, actually, that's something that we may need at some point. Let's see. And actually, 1 year later, I reached out back to Focal Point, and because two things. We had identified a specific need, I would say, for two reasons. The first one, definitely we are, as you know, in a highly regulated environment, and everything that we do needs to be documented. Everything, what is not written does not exist. So that's the motto of the FDA. So what needed to have really formal documentation of every decision that we were making. So how did we select this vendor and so on. So it was the whole thing. But also, I was also interested in a kind of project management tool more than a sourcing platform interacting with vendors and so on, because we manage pretty much 2,000 contractual documents every year. And I want to make sure that when we work with our sourcing managers, we know how many projects we have in flight, which steps are there according to our 4, 5, 6, 7-step process, and to say, yes, we have X process this way, then that. And to be able to track potentially dates according to tentative timeline, and to see how we perform from a timeline perspective. So for these two reasons, kind of having a project management tool, which would also be used as a central repository for any documentation that was somehow related to the RFP, so decision-making process and so on. So that's why we explored Focal Point capabilities. And the other tools that we looked at had very poor to none capabilities, reporting capabilities. So I was also really wanted to say, yes, if I filter by vendors, by date, by Can I really look at our activities, slice and dice the data the way we want? And it seemed at that time, that was our understanding that Focal Point would be able to support us from a central repository perspective, project management perspective, and reporting capability perspective as well.
What you've really done is created sort of like an alignment of different projects moving at different paces with full accountability and transparency that you were able to within almost like a central control board, if that would be a fair statement.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting. But you can be able to see that, and it had to be real-time adaptive.
Right.
And that's what you're looking for. Now, okay, I'm going to ask you a question here is now Focal Point, and there's a lot of companies out there in the world, right? I mean, you look at solution maps every day. So you got an email, sort of like, or a notice, those can get missed by 10,000 to 1. You Focal Point is a great company, obviously. But they're not on the mainstream map to the same degree as, let's say, some of the more high-profile ones. So were you ever at any point when you looked at Focal Point, was it strictly Focal Point all the way, or did you consider others?
Oh, yes, we explore. I work with my IT department, and we looked at 4 or 5 different options. And again, some of them really were pretty good, but didn't have any good reporting capabilities back in that time, or didn't demonstrate any flexibility on how to get close to what we really wanted. And that's also, I think, one of the decisions. I would say the 2 things that really made a difference is that first, we thought that Focal Point was very close to what we would really expect. That's one. But second, the level of flexibility on how they were able to already to customize, develop things. I remember even during the discussion, the selection process, we had not awarded Focal Point yet. They came up with a demo that looked actually that was very, very close to what we envisioned.
Okay.
So I said,
so that
wow.
means they were listening to you.
Absolutely.
And now, do you think that has a fact? Is like, Anders, for example, was a CPO. Do you think that background was a big part of it? In other words, they weren't a tech company making a solution; they were solution problem solvers using tech. I mean, is that a fair analogy?
Absolutely. They were really a tech company speaking procurement language.
Got it. And
So,
that helps that background, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. I didn't have to explain the why we wanted this and to define any single thing and so on. They really got it. Oh yes, you want to be able to report the savings. Oh yes, you want to do this and this. So that was making a lot of sense. One, but also, as you said, that was interesting that they were not ready. They were not trying to force a kind of already predefined tool saying, okay, it works for this and this company, so of course it will work for you. They were just very humble, trying to explain what we were doing, what we really needed, and say, okay, let's work on this. We think we understood. We provided 2 or 3 slides that we had that were summarizing our key specifications, I would say, our requirements. And the demo they gave was they were using exactly our terminology and so on. So I said, at least even if they are not there yet, they have such a good listening that it seemed that we can get there together.
In other words, problem solvers. Okay, let me ask you this question. Integration with your existing platforms. Is there any, and how challenging or easy or difficult or complex was that? Like, do you consider them to be like, in the old days, you used to call them bolt-on solutions. You've heard that term before, etc., which wasn't necessarily a compliment always. But I mean, how did you find they integrate it into your existing organization?
So to be fully transparent, we are not going that far at this point in terms of integration.
Okay.
But at least we are able to have a one-way feed at this point to make sure that, because one of my key points was to say we don't want to have, for example, different ways of naming the same vendor. So it should come for our source of truth. We do everything consistent and so on, so that when we search on a vendor, it comes the way it is used by any single other system in the city and so on. And so we have this type of feed on a regular basis, and it's working and it's going well. And the next step would be potentially to have a much stronger integration where we have kind of two-way communication and so on. We're not there yet. That's a plan, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, you know what's interesting as I'm listening to it also reminded me of not only the consolidation of a supplier name, but you know, in the MRO parts world, for example, you have parent-child SKUs or different SKUs for the same product, and it can become very, very difficult to bring that all together. Or you know that old saying, "You say tomato, I say tomato." I mean, it creates it. So this really helped consolidate the data. I mean, you know, everyone talks about data cleansing and everything. So what it really did, though, from your perspective, just in your area right now, it's giving you clean data.
Yes, absolutely. And I've worked, I was a project manager in my previous company when we implemented the Ariba source to pay solution and so on. So I'm not a tech guy, but I've been exposed to some implementations. And the key point is, why would we spend so much cleansing the time if our process was effective by design? So let's take the time to have something that is consistent upfront, and technically the data should be clean. We should not have to spend that much time reconciling two different databases and so on. Why do we have two different databases? What is the source of truth? And then so this is to try to have a consistent flow, I would say, within the various systems. Because as you said,
you're talking about an agent-based model, you know, to a varying degree. You really are. You were, you know, they talk about being digitally ready. Your organization was mature to look and say, the system shouldn't define our process and we adapt to that system. You know, the system should adapt to the way we work in the real world. That's really the strength of it. So I'm going to ask you one final question, and then I'll let you go. I really appreciate your time. When you look at the challenges that organizations are having, you know, the initiative failure rate, all of these things that are happening, it would seem to be not a technology issue, but a maturity, process ready, agent-based model issue. In other words, you know, we used to have a saying, garbage in, garbage out. Great technology will make a bad process faster, not better. I mean, that's really, I mean, that seems like that's where a lot of your success came, because you were taking the lead for that success. And then you found the partner that aligned with being able to work with you. I mean, that's what I'm taking away from that. I mean, is that a fair statement?
It is. It is. And I think the root cause here, what I've seen in other organizations, is some companies are very fragmented by department, and each department owns a system for a portion of the process without really considering that the end-to-end process is actually cross-functional. And so we have legal owning the contract module. We have procurement owning this source purchase to pay process. We have sourcing owning the spend visibility module and so on. Yeah, guys, same data, pretty much same source, same. So we may use different portion of we look at the data from different perspective, but 80% of the data is actually common, the whole thing. So, and I had the discussion, I remember, in the previous company where someone was talking about the end-to-end process. It was actually the end-to-end for this function.
Right.
It was absolutely not the end-to-end from a company perspective. And I think we need to look at it from a user perspective. They start here and they go here. They should not care about this function and this function and so on. We need the expertise from the various functions. But if we really want to be user friendly and making sure the journey of our users is really positive, and some companies start having really the concept of process owners who are really cross-functional along the way. To me, that's where it should be. So we are not at AutoCAD, we're not at that level of maturity, but at least we can still have this type of mindset to say, yes, we need to look at the big picture. Otherwise, if I'm just interested in this, that will be very difficult. And that's why we need to have so many interfaces with other departments, with other systems and so on. Because again, we just looked at our small use of the information.
Right. And so, like I said, you see what you need to do, you see the way it fits in with the whole company operation, and everyone has their process in each division that they own in, whatever, but it's always a coordinated or aligned effort.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, Stephane, I appreciate your time. Now, I've got to ask you this. There's two options with this. I've recorded the conversation we have. I love listening to you speak. So I can write about this, or I can actually use this recording. Now, certain companies say, I don't think you've given away anything secretive here, but are you okay if I were to use this recording? Because I think, you've described something so eloquently. And quite frankly, I think you should have a lot of pride in what you've done. You should be giving lessons to other companies.
No, I think it's fine. When you say I will use it, what type of use would you do? That's the only limitation. I just want to make sure, because I know that I could not have done this, but I know that I dropped the name of my company. So I just want to make sure that, again, if it's used with other companies and so on, that's not the intent. So that's my only question here.
Well, what I do is I publicize this. I have a blog and reach. I have about 60,000 followers just alone on LinkedIn, whatever. And companies come to me because there's a lot of skepticism about case studies. There's a lot of, it's all sounds like we used to call it, my mother wrote my resume. So you're going to get a good report card no matter what. So this would be actually shared with my community and broader. A lot of people will see it. Most of my communities are in the C-suite, and they come to me for insights about organizations, more so if they're looking at a solution provider. They want to know, is this the real deal, or am I getting a lot of marketing fluff? Because there is a lot of that out there. Too much. So that'll be shared publicly, but it's more within the community of people who are procurement professionals, executives, things along that line.
Okay, I think that's anyway. I didn't disclose any confidential information and so on.
Not at all. You actually had some very good things to say. You should again be giving a lecture on the circuit for that. Stephane, I thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
I'll keep you posted when it's released. But again, what you've talked about is really the foundation for success in any technology era. Whether it was back in the PC days and the 2800 baud modems to whatever it will be 15 years from now. Tech is always changing, but this is a constant that you've established. So well done. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye.